feels like a modern shooter, which, let's be honest, Tarkov has had some issues in regards to this feature. The UI in Tarkov is still surprisingly unintuitive, and there's a lot of quality of life changes that, at least in theory, should be easy to make, but just don't seem to be a priority of the dev team at this time. First, I'll go into the pros of Arena Breakout Infinite, and then I will do their weaknesses. Then I'll do the pros and the cons of Tarkov. Coming from the perspective of a Tarkov veteran, there were 3 areas that stood out to me in particular. First of all, the accessibility and onboarding, which is a huge factor. ABI holds your hand quite a bit, in a good way if you're a new player to the genre. For more experienced players, maybe the hand-holding might be a little too extreme. The tutorial, which does not exist in Tarkov, is pretty basic, but is still quite solid in terms of establishing some of the more basic rules of the game. The early game quests are clear, generally quite easy, and you're not immediately drowned in a sea of obscure mechanics that require you to pull up a guide on your second monitor, if you even have one of those. For a new player, this is excellent. For a veteran player, it means less friction in getting to the actual fun parts of the game. Secondarily, for me, was the performance and optimization. Anybody that's played Tarkov understands that it is a unbelievably demanding game. You just need to look at the Steam page for the game that was recently added and look at their recommended specs for the game, which very few people actually have a computer at this level, and especially given that GPU shortage that we had, which only ended fairly recently. ABI in its current state runs far smoother, considerably higher frame rates. At no point in time did my frames in ABI drop below 120, which is not something I can say for multiple maps in Tarkov. There's almost no stuttering, which this wipe specifically has been more of an issue for me. And just in general, the experience is more stable. Clearly, quality of life and accessibility was a huge priority when they were developing this game, and it would be nice if this was emphasized to a further extent in Tarkov. The third one would be the actual loot and the economy. The loot system is very familiar to Tarkov, but considerably more streamlined. There's some small differences, but grouping the loot based on rarity, as well as giving you a rough estimate as to what the loot is actually worth, is very beneficial in terms of determining what gear you should be picking up. Losing gear doesn't feel nearly as devastating, as the economy makes it quite easy to quickly build up a large sum of rubles. After my first week of playing the game, I'd already amassed 7 million rubles, and could run a pretty much full meta kit in almost every raid. You could also view that as a con, in the sense that the economy is so easy that even a new player can almost immediately start running some of the best gear in the game. But I feel like this would be better for the majority of players who want to be able to compete with the more no-life crowd. And then 2 other still important but not nearly as important factors would be the weapon customization and the matchmaking. It's an incredibly similar system to Tarkov. It's not nearly as in-depth, but it's very easy to understand, particularly for new players. And the matchmaking and server stability is honestly kind of incredible. The queues are insanely quick compared to Tarkov, and the matchmaking system will also automatically place you into a squad depending on the settings you're using, which can be incredibly beneficial for players like myself who are often playing solo. Now I will move into the weaknesses of the game. First of all, the AI behavior. The bots in ABI are just bots. They're very easy to kill. Even the boss AI is incredibly easy to manage. They don't have that unpredictability and danger factor of Tarkov's scavs and bosses. They approach from very predictable angles. Their movement is very basic, and I could only really see a situation where you would actually view them as a threat if you were also fighting a player at the same time. And this does considerably degrade the tension in the game. Um, Secondarily, the sound design and immersion. Tarkov's sound design is some of the best I've seen in a game. It has been refined considerably recently, but even just in general, every rustle, every distant gunshot, every footstep tells a story and creates a level of tension that ABI just doesn't really seem to achieve. Gunshots don't have the same impact. The environment audio doesn't build that same sense of dread. And I feel that particularly with enemies that are either very far away or are on different floors, it's quite difficult to pinpoint where they are based just on sound, which considerably changes the actual tactics. The third one would be the overall depth and complexity. Tarkov thrives on that unforgiving complexity, the intricate health system, diverse ammo types, and the deep hideout mechanics. ABI does copy most of these mechanics, but they are considerably more shallow. The medical system is heavily streamlined. The ammo types are mostly just unremarkable, and while there is a hideout system in the game, it does not provide even close to the same level of value that the Tarkov hideout does. And in regards to the actual extract shooter loop, the stakes just feel considerably lower. I had very little gear fear, and even after some of my better raids where I killed multiple players or got out with millions in loot, it just doesn't hit quite the same as it would in Tarkov. It definitely feels more arcadey in this aspect, which at least for me is a huge downside. So now we're going to go into more of Tarkov's strengths and ultimately why I feel like it is actually the stronger game of the two, particularly for veteran players. First of all, that unrivaled tension and gear fear. There is nothing I have found in gaming, at least in the PvP space, that matches the adrenaline rush of a Tarkov raid. The sheer panic of a distant gunshot whipping by your head, being ambushed by a player, or and that just dread of losing that gear and knowing that it might be some time before you have a kit like that again. That psychological aspect is so much stronger in Tarkov, and quite honestly, ABI doesn't even get close to capturing that. And depth and realism is far better in Tarkov. The incredibly complex ballistic system, the intricate health system, um, the extreme attention to detail with the ammo types and the weapon modding. It just creates a level of depth that a game like ABI simply can't match. The factions and lore, while admittedly quite cryptic, are far more in depth and well thought out. The dynamic between bears, USEX, scavs, and the bosses adds a layer of narrative that ABI currently lacks. And this will likely become even greater of a strength with the upcoming wipe, where we'll actually start to get some dedicated main story missions. And despite the many issues Tarkov faces, I feel that overall it's a better community, and it is more welcoming to players. Whereas my experience with some of my random squads in ABI, you've got a lot of players playing very selfishly, not really actually using those team mechanics the way that you are pretty much forced to in Tarkov, and it just creates this more arcadey toxicity feel, more akin to a game like Call of Duty, honestly, rather than an extraction shooter. Tarkov does have considerable issues related to its technical debt. desync, performance issues, and persistent bugs are still to this day a huge issue in Tarkov, and a main reason that many people either quit the game or quit early into the wipe. Um, they have claimed that they are going to solve the cheater situation by adding a kernel level anti-cheat with the next wipe and with the game coming out on Steam. However, even this wipe, the cheater problem has led to many unfair deaths and just a general sense of pointlessness for players that don't have the time to devote to this game. As well, I feel the learning curve in Tarkov is just incredibly steep. I personally view this as a strength, but for the average, more casual gamer, particularly people that, work full-time jobs, they have lives outside of work, etc., the sheer complexity and lack of hand-holding just make Tarkov incredibly difficult for those type of people to get into the game. Although some would also view that as a strength in the sense that like you really do have to commit if you want to be someone that is enjoying Tarkov long term. And I mean, I don't feel like I even need to say this at this point, but the UX and UI in Tarkov is still to this day quite clunky, unintuitive, and quite inefficient. I found that kitting up in between raids after dying or getting out of a raid is far faster in Arena Breakout, and this is also enhanced by those reduced queue times for ABI. Ultimately, if you're looking for a more accessible, polished, and performance-friendly extraction shooter, go with ABI. You won't have to deal with the complexity and some of the technical issues that come with Tarkov, and it's a fantastic entry point to this genre. Um, for Tarkov, if you crave that unparalleled tension, the incredibly nuanced gunplay, and the very unforgiving mechanics that do ultimately provide a sense of accomplishment that no other games really seem to be able to match, including ABI, Tarkov is certainly the better choice. And I would say, as somebody who's more experienced in this genre, I will be sticking with Tarkov, even though I feel that the majority of people, even the majority of people that are already interested in this genre, might feel more comfortable starting with something like ABI. Thank you for watching the video, especially if you've made it till this point. I'd love to hear your feedback on how you feel about each game in the comments. And please subscribe as well. I've recently hit double-digit subscribers, and I am hoping to get that to triple digits in the near future. Thank you for your support and for watching.